Welcome to Energy Stew. This is Peter Roth, your host, and I'd like to ask you, how are your relationships going? What a breeze, huh? Aren't relationships easy? No? Oh, well, maybe we all need to be conscious of how we're in relationships and how to work with them to make them better. And to do that is the author of an amazingly wonderful book that everybody should have because it really helps us solve solutions, have solutions to our relationships. It's called Love Hacks, Simple Solutions to Your Most Common Relationship Issues. So I'm so excited to talk with Kelli Miller. Kelli, welcome to Energy Stew.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. This is wonderful.
Well, I love your book because everybody, even if you have a great relationship, you're going to run into snags. And there's so much help in this book, suggestions on how to deal with all kinds of snags. And you have actually 15 different chapters that are basic ones.
Mhm.
And I went through them, and it's profound to see. You know, a lot of it makes sense anyway. I've been counseling couples for decades, and you know, I've learned a lot, and I've been helpful. But to have a book like this, I think I would have been much better at it.
Sweet. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think especially in today's culture, people are wanting kind of the quick and easy. And I mean, although there's no replacement for traditional couples therapy, I think there is a place to have these solutions that people need, right? I just need help with understanding my partner are fighting over our finances, or we feel culturally different, or, I feel like I'm doing all the chores in the house, and there's just simple things that we can do to mend people together and help their relationships.
But this is also for couples who are willing to work on their problems,
True.
and not
Correct.
all are. And I
Right.
don't know what hope there is for them. But
Exactly.
as long as they're willing to work on it, they can identify so many different problems in your chapters. You know,
Mm,
that someone doesn't listen to them, or they don't have enough time for each other,
right.
or sometimes they just don't feel in love the same way,
Exactly.
or they might misinterpret what love means.
Right. That's very true. And I do talk about that in that chapter.
I know. I just got absorbed in all your chapters because you make it clear, you make it, you make sense of it.
Mhm.
And there's I love the this term bisect,
Yes.
bisect, that it has to do with establishing boundaries, independence, support, equality, communication, and trust. I'm remembering my previous marriage. I've been married 3 times,
Okay.
and the first marriage was an absolute horror show. Luckily, only lasted a year. Second marriage went 8 years, and the reason it ended was that my wife kept calling me a good for nothing who would never amount to anything.
Oh.
And I decided I couldn't live with that any longer. Even her father would spit in my face. She figured it out from her father, I guess, who
Uh-huh. Yeah.
behaved towards me the same way. And and um, obviously you want to be with someone who believes in you.
Feel Yes. Well, who you feel respected by, right? For sure.
Right, right. So it has to do with, equality
Mhm.
and communication and trust.
Exactly.
And so many people, have issues within themselves that are projected into their partners.
Yes. That is very true. When
And
it feels, and I can even go beyond that, where it's actually about our own childhood stuff too, where if our partner is doing something, and I always say if it's hysterical, it's historical. So if you're feeling something really strong, it's typically not about what's happening with your partner. It's something that happened within you in childhood, right? Where somebody will say, I'm so annoyed, my partner's always late, and I feel, left out, and they're frustrating. And then I'll kind of say, who does that remind you of? I'm like, my mom, she was always late, and then I'm like, okay, so then we have some work to do around that.
Right, right. It's, and sometimes these patterns start before you have memory.
Oh, yes, that's very true.
Just as infants, we can have parents fighting and treating us poorly.
Exactly. And you pick up on that energy, which is all, what you're all about too, right? We're like, as little beings, you can pick up that energy.
And what's interesting is that we can establish survival mechanisms that if I survived this disabled parent who treated me so badly, and I need to heal that, and I can survive with that. I did get through it. I lived through it. So maybe it's a good idea to pick a partner who's like that. And maybe I can heal it now as an adult,
Exactly.
and I know I can survive it. And then once you get into a relationship like that, you go, why did I choose this person?
Exactly. A lot of times we unconsciously choose partners in hopes that, okay, they can do the same patterns, but this time it'll be different. Exactly. Like you said, I'll heal from it. That kind of thing.
And
Yeah.
often we marry somebody who we think is not that parent. And we only find out a couple of years later, oh my God, I married my
Exactly.
We never thought of it that way.
So true.
So yeah, it's amazing how life creeps up on us in these patterns that we then have to solve as adults. And what I love about the book is that, it's about our relationships, but it's also about ourselves in relationships, or even without apart from relationships, because
Yeah.
the relationships only bring out what our own issues are.
So true. It's the mirror, right? Well, I think that's what I try to stress in the book is like, look, I mean, we can only change ourselves. We cannot change our partners. But if we can do that work within ourselves, that can, by definition, help the relationship. Because we're working ourselves and the other person's going to be more receptive to our changes and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I have couples that come to my office and they're kind of point like, hey, can you fix him, her?
It's not me, it's him, her.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
And it's interesting how we attract our troubles. And we need to, we need to be in complementary relationships that challenge us.
For sure. That is the truth. I mean, I think that's, if we want to get philosophical, I believe that we find partners who, are going to challenge us in a lot of ways and help us teach these lessons that we're supposed to learn.
Yeah.
But
No,
it's hard. Sometimes you're like,
laugh
I
at
just want to coast. Yeah.
I laugh at that because I've certainly, even though I've been married 3 times, I've been with my current wife for 44 years. So, and we're figuring it out. Um, it's every relationship always needs some work.
Well, I love that you said we're figuring it out, right? Because I think a lot of people think 44 years, you've obviously figured it out, but it's like every day, you're learning something new or you're trying to work hard, within the relationship. So I love that, you said that because it's like it is, it's always, a process.
This reminds me of a theatrical show that my brother-in-law started, and so I went to it, and it's called I Do.
Okay.
And it started on their wedding night. It's one couple, and the only cast were a husband and wife. And it ended on their 50th anniversary. And the whole production took place in their bedroom. And so every 10 minutes during this show, you'd be looking for your jacket. You'd say, this couple isn't going to make it. It's like, oh my God. And then all of a sudden they get it together again and they're happy again. And then
Mhm.
10 minutes later, oh
Uh,
no, it's
uh-huh.
terrible. And then all of a sudden, 50 years have gone by and they've really accomplished a life together that you might say is wonderful, but you saw all along the way a rocky road that they overcame each time and got back to loving each other and being happy together. And and I remember leaving the theater. It was a matinee, and there were all these old couples leaving the theater because they more old people go to matinees.
Right.
You don't have to drive at night.
Uh-huh.
And all these couples were walking out with smiles on their faces, going, "I guess we're all right."
Oh, that's so cute. Well, that's just it. I mean, I think that our culture really makes it out that every day is going to be wonderful and blissful. And if you're in love, then, you don't fight. I mean, I just think, and I think it's these reminders that, relationships are work and they take time and they take effort. And some days are great. And I think one of the reasons I wrote Love Hacks was just this reminder of like, if things are tough, stick it out a little bit longer than you think. Just give that attempt because it will pay dividends, that patience and that effort and that time.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who actually get remarried 2 or 3 times.
Right. That's funny.
So yeah, it's amazing how much can be worked out as long as it's people who are of consciousness that are interested in
Mm.
saving themselves and each other.
Yeah.
And there are people who aren't. So it's sad, um, but with the right work
Yes.
and the right book, it's taken care of. Um, and there's some words you had in here that were kind of interesting. Um, Catastrophizing.
Yes.
So there are people who are catastrophizing too much and
Mhm.
making mountains out of molehills.
Yeah. Yes, you hear it a lot, right? And it's a cognitive distortion. And the reason I put that in there is because I think a lot of times we don't realize we're doing it. And similarly, black and white thinking is a cognitive distortion where you kind of think, all or nothing. And so it's just kind of having that awareness of it's not to shame somebody and say, oh, you're doing this. It's more of like, oh, okay, I got to check in. Okay, wow, I'm going into that black and white thinking. I've got to kind of go in the gray, or oh, I'm catastrophizing again. Okay, I'm going to try to break that pattern of doing that. Yeah, just that awareness.
Yeah, and or universalizing,
Hmm.
when it's really about um, um, universalizing. I'm distracted for a second. Universalizing is about, sorry, something happened just outside of my office that distracted me.
Hmm.
Is about making also is like, you always do this,
Right, exactly. The shoulds, don't should on anybody, right? That's what they say.
right? And and then having unrealistic expectations. Um,
Mhm.
it's expecting every night to be starry,
What you talked about, yeah.
or just having like one person could be more of a romantic than the other
It's true.
and think there's something wrong because the
Mm.
romance doesn't feel the same.
Right.
And
Yeah. Well, I think that's important to talk about that. If I want to speak on that for a minute, I do think there's this idea that the way when we fall in love, we have all these hormones that come out, oxytocin, dopamine, and all these hormones. And so I think a lot of people feel like, oh my gosh, I didn't feel like I felt in the beginning. And I always have to remind people that's not sustainable, right? That beginning piece, we wouldn't get anything done. And so it's really about looking at it as, okay, this is a different kind of love over time. Where at the beginning, it's going to be really intense and lustful and exciting. And then over time, it's like, okay, that's now replaced with more of an intimacy that you couldn't have at the beginning that can only be built over time, right? Like for your example, 44 years where you have a deep intimacy and connection that couldn't get within, a few weeks of relationship that was built in history and memories and things like that. And so I think it's reframing and saying, okay, maybe it's that I don't feel in love with my partner anymore. Maybe it's that, oh, I have to look at it that the love is going to feel different than it used to.
And the sex also,
Yes. Right.
because
That's
that,
true.
that's just a way of love expressing itself. And
Mhm.
at first all the oxytocin and, and the hormones. And
Mhm.
then later on, it's like translating it into deeper into the relationship of love, of the intimacy of love, and that sex is really an expression of love, not just using hormones. And,
Exactly. That's very true.
yeah,
Very true.
and so there's so much that we learn. All life goes on um, in ways that we have to catch up to it,
Mhm. That's very true.
and in couples, one person might be some steps ahead of the other.
Mhm. Right. Exactly. And that requires patience, which is not easy. Yeah. Which
Yeah.
is tough.
But I remember when my kids were teenagers, now they're in their late late 30s and early 40s. And um, I remember that it's hard on relationships when you're also juggling with teenagers.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think kids in general change the dynamic of relationships for sure.
Right.
Um,
But I think teenagers make it the hardest.
oh, see, I'm sort of there now with my kids, but I mean, infancy and, that's tough because, there's a lot of demands and you kind of can't give to your relationship in the same way.
Yeah, but it's
Uh,
a different kind of demand
mhm.
than teenagers misbehaving.
True. Right. Right.
Yeah. And then
Mhm.
husband and wife have to figure out how to be in harmony with each other, dealing with,
These issues.
difficult issues. Yeah. And so I'm remembering how difficult that was. Um,
Mhm.
and my wife and I, our expectations of each other in dealing with it, wanting to be on the same page, but not necessarily being able to.
Mhm. Exactly.
So we're two different people.
Yeah.
So let's come back to the issue of boundaries,
Okay. Sure.
because I'm remembering when I was writing this down earlier to prepare, I was thinking of people who don't want boundaries. They want codependency.
Oh, yes. Right.
They want
Yes.
to be, it's like we are one.
And I always say the best relationships to me are the letter H, where you have two independent people and there's kind of that bridge, rather than the letter A, where you're kind of leaning and, that kind of thing. So you want to have two people who are independent and have their own needs in life. And then you do have that bridge where you come together, because you each need to stand strong individually.
I think it's fairly early on in relationships where people don't understand that.
Mhm.
And they think the relationship is to create a oneness
Right.
where we're like joined at the hip.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's true. Well, and I think again, talk about culture, right? If you think about that Jerry Maguire movie where you complete me, it's this idea that we're not complete until we have this person, rather than, hey, we're whole by ourselves and this person is, a bonus, right? It's like it's a partnership, rather than a completion of the human being.
Right, exactly. So there's so much, it goes on with every little nuance of a relationship that we could, we can identify. And that's why I don't want to keep this to one show with you, and we'll do some
We'll do a follow-up part two.
in the future. Sure. Because there's so much you've had so much experience with so many different kinds of troubled people.
That's true. Yes. But I will give hope to listeners, I mean, I think that I have really seen miracles if people are just willing to give it a little bit of effort, right? Just a little bit of effort can go a long way. And so I've seen couples where they come in and I'm even like, uh-oh, well, let's see what happens here. And there's this shift, and it can happen. So
And
I
I
really,
think the biggest problem is having to do with the individuals in the relationship.
Mhm.
That it can shift, yes, but if one of the people is too disturbed within
Yeah,
themselves
right. That's true.
and need to really do a lot of work on themselves,
That's very
that
true.
makes it harder.
Right. That is true. Yeah, and that person has to be willing.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's another point, is that people aren't always interested in doing the hard work.
Yeah, well, it's scary, and who likes to feel vulnerable and all of that.
Yeah.
But the only way out is through, right? We've got to do that work.
But what's interesting is that at the end of doing the work
Mhm.
is a renewal that's powerful,
Yes, very true.
because you're cleaning out the cobwebs.
Yes, exactly. And then you have you're right, like a brand new freshness and an openness that you didn't have before.
Yeah, we just had that with my apartment because
Mhm.
the TV show Law and Order took it over for a week.
It's
They
funny.
changed so much, and they brought it back to its original state, but with new
Uh-huh.
paint and
Oh, wow. Okay. So they were filming there at your
yeah, they
apartment?
filmed in my apartment.
That's so
They
cool.
stripped out 4 rooms and brought in all their own stuff and repainted and put in new floor coverings and everything. And then they're really good because they've been in business a long time at bringing everything back, but it was all
Right.
fresh and new. And we
Yeah.
liked the different paint that they put
Oh,
on the
that's
walls. And now it's like, oh, I feel like I'm so refreshed.
good.
So I'm
Cleaning.
thinking of that in terms of relationships where you really have to take them apart and, look at the skeletons in the closet.
So true. Get rid of the dust. Exactly.
Yeah. Feng shui,
Yes, exactly.
feng shui relationship. So, it's each chapter, the 15 different chapters, you get into deep stuff. And because there's so many problems that, thinking of like addictions that people have. And almost everybody has some addiction or other.
Very true. Yeah, of some capacity, right? And I think people forget that it's true. Whether it's, more obvious, like a drug addiction, or less like a shopping addiction, right? Which seems kind of benign, or, something like that. But yeah, we all can have something. So I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, and so it's good, to know each other's addiction issues.
And if it is something like drug addiction, that the other partner, the one who doesn't have the addiction, but the partner gets some help too. Because it's a lot to deal with in a relationship, and it is important for that person to get some help. So I speak a lot about that in Love Hacks.
But I think what's important in saying that is that every relationship is it's a two-way street, and that both people have to be open
Mhm.
to change.
Yes,
As I think we said earlier, people come in and go, no, it's not my fault, it's the other person's fault.
exactly.
And that doesn't get very far.
No.
It takes two to tango.
Well, it's really funny when I have couples like that and I say, okay, well, we're each going to talk about our own part. What are we doing in this relationship? And they're kind of like, no, I was ready to like blame and and I'm like, no, it starts with us. We got to take accountability for what we're doing or not doing. So I think that's important.
And I know couples that have ended um, therapy because one of them wanted to make sure that the other one got all the blame.
Oh, right. Yes.
And walked out saying it's all
Uh-huh.
her fault. If you think I have anything to do with this, I'm out of here.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So it's sometimes you just have to take a deep
Mhm.
breath and realize that not everybody can be helped,
It's true.
but more people than think they can. And
Mhm.
sometimes people do need to separate for a while and you
It's
know
true.
feel their
Yeah.
own selfness
Mhm. That
and
is very.
come back with more perspective about who they are.
Well, I think too, it's important that we work on our own communication skills. We can always better that. You know, it doesn't even have to be with our romantic partners, just learning how to communicate more effectively. And so I talk a lot about in the first, few chapters of Love Hacks, just that piece of using I statements and saying, I feel this way. And, so if you talk to your boss next time and you're kind of using those, your boss is going to be more receptive. So, these are all tools that we can learn in our everyday life that I think can help our relationships as well.
Yeah, with our bosses and our
Yeah.
employees and
Exactly.
everybody.
Really. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's why this book is so, to me, it's like, it's a guide for everyone, just, even if things are going great, to have it around when, the dirt gets kicked up and
Right.
and we have to look at ourselves in new
Well, that
ways.
was my hope too, that like people could have it. They don't have to read it start to finish. It's like, hey, I'm just having this issue. I can go to this chapter, keep it on hand. And then later on, oh, this issue popped up. Okay, great. I'm gonna pull out Love Hacks. What does it say? And that was my hope, that it could be kind of a resource for people.
No, I think it's wonderful for that. Because you have profound ideas about it all in ways that get to the point, and you dig out all the different aspects of each of the chapters that um, you're not a lightweight about
Right, exactly.
it. So it took a lot to do this, a lot of life experience, as well as a good talent for writing, that put this book together. I'm so glad to have it, because I've learned a lot from it, even though I've been around for a long time and seen a lot. Um,
Thank
it's
you.
it,
I'm
it's good to have like an alphabet,
for these kind of things.
and that you can uh, use it more, this is a left brain and right brain book.
Thank you. That's
Oh,
really
thank you. I'm so happy to know you and to talk with you about Love Hacks. How can people find out more?
Yeah, so you can find Love Hacks anywhere books are sold. And my website is Kelli, Kelli, millertherapy.com. And I also have Instagram, which is Kelli Miller Therapy, and find me on Facebook. So I'm kind of not hard to miss.
You get around. It's great. Thanks so
Thank you
much for
so
being
much.
here.
I really appreciate it.
Thank
Love your
you.
energy. Thank you.
And this is Peter Roth, your host of Energy Stew at prn.live. I can be reached at peter@heartriver, HEART, river.org. I'd love to hear from you, and thanks so much for listening.